So let's talk about a little bit about in your experience, what would you say would be some of the typical goals you're asked to work with the teachers you coach? What are some of the typical goals you've been asked to focus on?
Um, Typically, it has to do with some type of routine in the classroom, whether it is the instructional cycle, as we spoke about, and making sure we're hitting everything in the time. It all, honestly, right now, all of it comes down to classroom management and strong instructional strategies, really. I mean, even some of the people that I've worked with content, it really comes down to, are you giving too much time for that strategy? Are you talking way too much in class? Are you giving them a chance to practice the objectives that you've just taught them? We have to, first and foremost, what I love to do in talking about the listening in that first meeting that we have, and sometimes the second one, I need to kind of understand what's going on. And that the video helps, because we ask them to do a 360 video of their classroom, and oftentimes what they'll do is they'll, as they're going around, they're talking about kind of the systems that they have in place around the classroom, which is really powerful. Then in that first conversation, I delve in deeper and ask what those systems look like, because here's what we don't do in SIBME is we don't add on more and more and more routines and systems if they're already in place school-wide. We work with what we have, and sometimes that requires us as coaches to do a little research on some of these because we haven't heard of them, or they're brand new, so we have to do a little research. But what we try to do, again, is meld what's going on already in the classroom and at the school with some new practices or some refined practices, and we do this. We don't add on and recreate the wheel that already exists. We take the wheel and we make it better. And so that's really what I want to stress too, especially with administrators that are thinking we're going to come in and just, that's not it. We're not here to take over. We're here to refine and perfect what's already in place. And so I got on my tangent, Allyson. I lost what I was saying.
Well, well, I'll just follow up then, Kelley.
Okay.
So, the idea is that and that's one of the concerns as a supervisor or principal is, we've worked really hard to have, let's say, the CHAMPS system in place, Safe and Civil Schools CHAMPS system. And we've trained all of our teachers on CHAMPS. And so I'm concerned if I hired this virtual coach from SIBME who's coming to us from a different state, who maybe doesn't know about CHAMPS, I'm concerned that they're going to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they're going to lead my teacher in a different direction than the rest of the building is going, and tell them, a different system. And I think, so what you're saying is so important as we try to work within the system, the systems that are in place within the school. And typically speaking, if there are systems in place, those systems are in place and were chosen wisely and for good reasons. So typically sometimes it's, you have a CHAMP system in place, which means you have these very clear expectations every time you have an activity. But the teacher we're working with, even though they have the CHAMPS poster on the wall, they're not emphasizing that system.
No, or they don't fully understand the system. Sometimes the newer teachers that have walked in never had someone sit with them and say, this is exactly how the system works. So sometimes one of our goals simply is talk to your neighbor teacher about the program and what they do. Sometimes we'll ask them to go observe another teacher in their grade level. And come back and just see a half an hour of a lesson or a half an hour of a transition. And, I know, Alice, I finally remembered what we were talking about. No, we're talking about the other thing I want to say is routines, and talking about routines and transitions. Those are the pieces that I find are the crux of successful teaching. So often, one of the first things that a teacher will say to me is, I don't have enough time to get everything in that I am expected to do. We have to spend so many hours on this and so many hours on this. By the end of the day, I don't get to X, Y, and Z. So we have to look at that on a deep level. First of all, I have to fully understand what the expectations are time-wise and content-wise, but also we have to ask ourselves, are we using the time effectively? And that's really where a bulk of our conversation is for sometimes a couple weeks is, are we using time effectively? How can we shave off time? What routines do we have in place? And Allyson, you spoke so eloquently about having the administration set clear expectations. We as teachers need to set clear expectations for our students. especially our little ones. We say it one time and expect our little ones to go, okay, sure, that's going to happen. But no, we need to maybe act it out. We need to say it 4, 5, 6, 7 times. And even then we're going to have to repeat it again. And I think sometimes we get, as teachers, get frustrated that I've said this. Nope, we need to find other ways to show them that this is the routine that we're following. This is the expectation that needs to happen. I just worked with a teacher that we literally modeled a kindergarten. They were going on their first field trip, and they had them put chairs in and everything, and we modeled what it looks like to sit on the bus, because some of those students had literally never sat on a school bus before. And we had to model that because, as we know, with so many instructors, field trips can bring a lot of anxiety for a teacher. And so to relieve that anxiety, we model that behavior several times before we go on the actual trip. And when that individual came back, said, we still had some bumps in the road, but that bus ride was great, because they all understood what the expectation was. So the two main things I think that overall I work with are clear expectations and how long the appropriateness of a segment or a lesson is, and transitions. We can shave off so much time with transitions and making them accurate and the expectations solid before we even ask them to do anything.